Hey, good evening. How you guys doing? Just kind of grooving along that tune. It's got a sweet little kind of thing happening. Hey, I want to begin tonight with a couple of questions. Two questions. The questions actually come from a New York Times op-ed writer named Nicholas Kristof. And the first question is, question number one is, which of these would you rather be, Richard or Lorna? Now, here's Richard. Richard is an ambitious 36-year-old white commodities trader in South Florida, Miami Beach. Hello. He is healthy, athletic, stunningly handsome, I don't mind saying. Earns about $250K a year, drives a Porsche. He lives alone in a house with a pool. He has dated his way through a series of gorgeous women. Richard's job is stressful, but he spent this past Christmas in Tahiti and is looking forward to another amazing vacation this year, unencumbered with all those family attachments and obligations like taxiing the kids around and doing chores for his wife. He has the freedom to indulge in his passions such as reading and marathon running and writing poetry. In the last few months, he's composing an elegy about the war in the Middle East. And then there's Lorna. Lorna is a 65-year-old African-American woman, and she and her husband live in the opposite of Florida, Buffalo, New York, where they earn a combined income of about $70,000. She is a little overweight and some might say plain in appearance. Lorna has kidney problems. She's on regular dialysis, but that does not impede her social life or babysitting her 7 grandchildren. She's a retired school assistant, very close with her 67-year-old husband, and very, very active in their church, singing in the choir, attending a weekly Bible study, and serving on a number of what they call committees. Some of you have in churches that have those. Lorna believes in tithing, that is giving 10% of her income to charity and to the church. And in the last few days, she's been organizing a church drive that has raised $10,000 for the refugees from the wars in the Middle East. So, which one? Which life, whose life would you rather have, Richard or Lorna? Now, from outward appearance, according to how we're judged in our current cultural moment, I would say Richard seems to have it all. Like Richard is living the high life. Few of us would intentionally choose Lorna's life over his. But here's the second question. Which one is happier? Which one is happier? I don't know them. I don't know who's happy. While you're chewing on that, we are in part 2 of our series, What Our World Needs Now. And we said last week, like if we just had a mic to pass around the room, we would never, ever do this, like an open mic time. We could all just list our ideas and policies and changes that the world needs, our schools and our governments, what the economy needs, maybe international politics, social policies and changes, maybe spiritual things, maybe the candidate we think our world needs. But as we started our series last week, we began with what I think might be a radical idea, maybe an unusual idea. The idea itself is not ours. It didn't come from us. It actually came from Jesus. That what our world needs now is actually you. What our world needs now is for you to be the mature, healthy, whole. The word we learned last week was teleos. Teleos, or complete image of God version of yourself that you were created to be. And what our world needs right now is for us, individually and collectively, to be who God is calling us to be. What the world needs now, according to Jesus, is for his followers to look and smell and taste like who we really are, for Christians to be Christ-like mature followers of Jesus who have the same mindset as Jesus, the same priorities as Jesus, who view the world through the way that Jesus viewed it, who live and love like Jesus lived and loved. And more than that, what the world needs now is Jesus-following communities like ours to be Jesus-like, to actually follow Jesus collectively as he really is and was. Like, that's what defines us with all of our differences in politics and so forth. That that one thing that would unite us all is that is who we are and that is what we want to be because of how good Jesus was and is. Like, if Christians were to actually be like that, to be like he really was and is, if Jesus following communities were to be that, like that would actually be really, really, really good for the world? Which then led to a question last week. If that's true, then what does that look like? What does Christ-like look like and feel like and act like? Well, the Apostle Paul, who was one of the early, first-generation followers of Jesus, he actually answered that question right there in a remarkable section of a letter that he wrote to Jesus communities in the region of Galatia, the Roman province of Galatia, modern-day Turkey. And these are actually the first Jesus communities or churches that Paul had ever started. And this is probably the first of the many letters, the first of the letters that he ever wrote to these churches. And it's in this section that Paul describes what mature looks like, what healthy looks like, what Christ-like looks like and acts like and reacts like. And this section has a somewhat famous name. You may have heard this before. It gets the name from what Paul actually says, called the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit. And in the section, he's describing what happens in and with and through and or even around a person when they are walking by the Spirit, are being led by the Spirit, are living in and living by the Spirit, keeping in step with the Spirit. And the whole idea of this language is that this is the kind of life that's connected to and aligned with and going with the Spirit, and it produces somewhat or just organically or naturally a certain character or experience. In other words, you could call this the outcome of our active surrender to and cooperation with, active in the sense that though it is God's Spirit that is doing this, producing this in us, we are not passive in the process. We are actually very active in our surrender to and cooperation with God's Spirit in us and around us, producing not by willpower, we say this sometimes, not by willpower, but by willingness, by our active cooperation with the Spirit as we are walking by and led by and just living in and living through and keeping in step with the Spirit. And it really doesn't take a whole lot of convincing, I don't think, that this would actually be really good for the world. So we said last week, imagine a family, imagine a home or a home life, or imagine a community or even a nation. Imagine a nation of people who could be described by these traits that we're looking at. Like, how good would things be? How good would things be in that home? How good would things be in that community? How great would life be in that nation, for that nation? It would be pretty amazing. And then we said, or just imagine, because we can't tell the nation what to do, let's just imagine if everyone who called themselves Christian, just the people who called themselves Christian, were actively becoming this kind of person. And so last week, we looked at just a partial list. Here is Paul's full description of what this looks like. But the fruit of the Spirit, he says, is love, joy, peace, patience or forbearance, bearing with, bearing up under, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And this is really key. Paul isn't just describing inward, moral, spiritual qualities. You just feel it and you just know it and it's inside of you and it's so good. It's like inner peace and inner joy and I just have that. It's key to understand that what he's actually describing is how a person is experienced by other people. How people experience me, how people experience you. In other words, we said last week, it is a list of character qualities that are both inward and for real and outward. They're both personal and they're social and relational and horizontal. They're experienced and expressed, lived in and lived out. In other words, this list, this description is both what I'm like inside my skin, what it's like to be inside of me, and what it's like to be on the other side of me, like what I'm bringing to the room when I walk in. In other words, here's what he's saying. A person who is walking by the Spirit, walking in the Spirit, living in that flow, the Spirit is flowing in them and thriving in them and through them, is someone who is growing and maturing to be increasingly joyful. Joyful, this deep sense of well-being and true happiness, and therefore they are enjoyable to be around, and they're, I love this one, peaceful, a calm, non-anxious presence. Would love that, thank you. Patient, or the word is used forbearance, maybe long-suffering is the word I used last week, meaning a person who just has a long fuse, a wide bandwidth for error. They bear with and bear up under, meaning they have grit, they have endurance, they're not easily ruffled. That's awesome. And kind. And kind often is paired with patience in Paul's writings. If patience is the passive side of how I don't overreact, kindness is the active side of how I, in the series we recently did, how I underreact, like the incredibly good thing I do, the act of generosity, especially when it's undeserved, patient and kind and good, which goes with that as well. When he's talking about being good, he's not talking about being good like a moral quality, like goody two-shoes kind of good. He's talking about doing good, the kind of person who just does really good things to people and for other people. Good and faithful, meaning trustworthy. Trustworthy. You can want to be trusted. It is a different thing to be worthy of it, right? The kind of person who has earned the right to be trusted in, to be relied in and counted upon. Gentle, which means sometimes this word is translated meek or even humble, but it means someone who's just not harsh. They're not harsh, they're not rude. You ever have that moment where it wasn't you, it was somebody else, and they said something, and they might have been right, but it was just harsh. You're like, bro, you had a point, but that was just so harsh. The way you said that, that didn't land in a helpful way, but instead someone who is, in this term, gentle or meek, they're able to be considerate. They're able to reach a person where they're at. They are emotionally resonant. Oh, how awesome is that? Meeting someone where they're at and able to bring them along. Gentle and finally self-controlled, which is a very high ideal in the Greco-Roman world where Paul is writing. And it spoke of a person who is able to keep their passions and their drives and their appetites and even their tempers in check. It is someone who is able to say no to themselves for the greater good, for the good of the other person, for the good of the group, for the good of the community, self-control. And one more that's actually the heading of the list. It's the one that all of the others flow from and are expressions of. That is loving. Loving, filled with love, motivated by love, by care and compassion and interest in the other person, a desire for their best, exuding love and acting in love towards the other person, which, by the way, is what the rest of the description is all about, what that looks like when somebody loves really well. And fundamentally for Paul, this is what it means to be a spiritual person. This is right here what it means to be a spiritual person, a person of the Spirit, filled with the Spirit, walking with the Spirit, which in turn is what it means to be a maturing, healthy, whole Christian, a Christ-like person. And that really is what our world needs now, and that's what this series is all about. Now, there's a line that really stands out to me from the life of Jesus. It comes from a conversation that Jesus is having with his closest followers the night before he's crucified, and he already knows what is about to happen. It's the famous Last Supper scene, if you've ever heard of that. And this particular part of the story is told in one of the 4 biographies of Jesus that come out of the first century world, written by a guy named John, who was an eyewitness follower of Jesus and was there that night when Jesus said these words. And here's the line. We're jumping into the middle of a conversation. Here's the line right here. I've told you this, and like, what did he tell him? We're in the middle of a conversation. I've told you this so that my joy would be in you, and your joy, complete, full, like maxed out. I've told you this so that my joy would be in you, which raises a question for me. How do you picture what Jesus was like? How do you imagine him to be? Like when you hear stories about Jesus or you read the biographies of Jesus or you read stories about Jesus, how do you picture him? Like how do you imagine him to be? Do you picture him like real serious, pretty serious? Like he's intense, okay? He's an intense guy. He's like pretty hardcore, he's very focused. He's got stuff to do, driven, hard worker, right? Maybe kind of stoic or maybe a little judgmental, maybe just a little like disappointed. Okay, he's just, the eye roll has to always be happening because like really people, really, I mean, so like maybe Peter's the fun one and Jesus always has like one eyebrow raised, reeling him back in, Peter, Come on, settle that down. It's not that funny. Is Jesus in your imagination serious, or is he happy? Like joyful, fun? Is he enjoyable to be around? Is he lighting up the room? Is he lifting people up? Is he laughing and smiling and enjoying the moment? Kind of like I enjoy how the hit show The Chosen often depicts the character of Jesus just smiling, enjoying stuff, enjoying moments. When Jesus said, "My joy will be in you," in other words, you'll be about as joyful as I am. Was that a good thing? Was Jesus joyful? Really? Was he happy? And the answer is, he must have been. He must have been. He must have been so joyful that they were like envious of how joyful he was. Like they were walking around going, how does he always do that? Like, how is he always so okay? How is he always bringing that with everything that's going around? What is he on? What does he do? How can I get more of that? How can I be like that? When Jesus said, "My joy will be in you," they must have wanted that. They must have wanted to be just like that, which raises another question. Why is Jesus so happy? Like, why would Jesus be so joyful? What's he got to be happy about? Seriously, like, why would he be so enjoying this human life with all of its misery and pain and poverty and limitations, with all of the disease that surrounded him and the hatred and the animosity, the vitriol? And trust me, he was up to his eyeballs in all of that all day long. He never shied away from it. He never avoided it. Why is Jesus so happy? And the answer is love. Love makes people happy. Love makes people happy. Yes, receiving it, that's awesome, that's nice. But way more the key is giving it. Giving love. Now, this great line about joy is actually, as I said, part of a longer conversation, and it begins right after that famous Last Supper meal, as they're walking out of the city of Jerusalem, and it's gotten dark and the lamps of the city have been lit. They're leaving the city of Jerusalem now, perhaps passing by some vineyards, and as they walk by the vines of this vineyard, I just kind of imagine maybe Jesus even rubbing his hand along them as he paints this visual for them like this. He says, I'm the true vine. And he says the true vine because he's creating this intentional allusion to something the prophet Isaiah said, and the Psalms speak of it as well. And so he's creating this, he's like riffing on this famous scene that they all would have picked up on right away. I'm the vine, my father's the gardener, so he's the one that's planted this vineyard, and he's cultivating it and pruning, and he's making sure everything's really healthy. And you, he says, you are the branches. So he creates this metaphor, and you don't have to be a gardener. You don't have to have a green thumb at all to pick up where it's going, to understand how plants work, right? He's creating this metaphor of what? A constant connection. The connection that the branch has to the vine, staying attached to that flow of life that results in all of this abundance and great fruit. And this particular vine must be a healthy one because everything's working the way it's supposed to be. And there are grapes all over it. And then, of course, he says, because you know how plants work, hey, if a branch gets severed from or detached from the vine, no good is coming from that. It will wither and die. And Jesus is saying, that's kind of like the spiritual life. That picture there, it's kind of like what the spiritual life is like. This life of constant connection and openness and life and fruitfulness, this sense of the flow of life happening in us. And then, having painted that, he pulls back from the metaphor, the vine and branch imagery, because even the best metaphors have limits. And one thing that vines and branches lack is anything at all like love. And so he says, now pulling away from the metaphor, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you, so remain in my love. The life of the vine, that sap, that nutrients, that's now defined as, it's love. I've been talking about love this whole time. What you're remaining in, what you're staying connected to is a flow of love. from my Father to me, through me to you. It's a flow of love. And this is weird. The way to remain in that flow of love is, he says, to keep my commands. Keep my commands, and then you'll remain in that flow of love. Or we might say, the way we might say it is, if you will do all that I've been telling you to do, if you'll do all that I've been talking about, all of these ways of life that I've been training you in for the last few years, everything you've heard from me and seen in me that we've done together and talked about together, the way I've lived and acted and reacted, that's how you just do that. You stay in that, and that's how you remain in the flow of love. Now, do not hear what he is not saying. He is not saying, keep my commands and obey me so that you'll be worthy of my love. Does not say that. Doesn't say, if you keep my commands, then I will love you. No, this is about something way different from that. This is about a way of staying in a flow of life, which is actually a way of love. And in fact, he's talking about exactly the way of love that he's lived out with his Father this whole time. It's just like how I've obeyed my Father's commands. I've obeyed everything he said and led me to do. I've done it all. I've just said an immediate yes. I've done everything that my Father has led me to do and told me to do. And I have remained in that flow of love. And this is really a constant theme for Jesus, especially in John's biography of Jesus. He emphasizes this idea over and over again. And as you read John's biography, which I encourage you to do, maybe take it and just skim through it a couple times this week, you will see this over and over again. It becomes really clear that this is not about Jesus waking up every morning or us waking up every morning with a commandment list, a list of to-dos and to-don'ts, and it's really long. It's like, whew, okay, so today if I do all the to-dos and don't all the to-don'ts, then I'll be good, and then the Father will love me and everything will work right. When you track through the life of Jesus through John's story, you are going to see that Jesus here's what he's talking about. He is just always connected to his Father. He's always connected to his Father in this relationship of love, always just attuned to and attached to his Father and what his Father is doing. And so, for example, you'll see these things. He'll say this kind of stuff all the time in John's story of his life. He'll say things like, hey, I don't do anything of my own accord. I don't do anything by myself. I'm never doing what I want to do, just making it up as I go along. No. Everything I do is just what the Father's leading me, what the Father is telling me, or in this case, what I'm seeing the Father doing. I'm just always watching. I'm always listening to what he might be up to, where he might be leading, where he might be working. And and by the way, my Father's always up to something, and he's always up to something good. And when I see what he's doing, or when I hear how he's leading me, I just say yes, because it's gonna be good. I just say yes, and I step right into that. And at the heart of it all is love. The love that he has for me and that I have for him. And so now, towards the end of his time with them, towards the end of this time he's had with them, he's offering to them, and I think to us, that very same thing, that very same connection and responsiveness. So if you keep my commands, he says, if you keep my commands, if you do it just like that, you live the way you've seen me live with my Father now, through my Father and me, you do that, it's like, okay, so I'll try, Jesus, but exactly what are you commanding? So what are the commands? Now, of course, to some degree, it's like the whole last few years, right, of everything that he said to them, everything they've heard, everything they've seen, everything they've experienced. But here he just boils it down, just so simply as this. What is it that he commands? Love. That's it. His redefined version of love, extraordinary, extreme love. Here it is, love. Love people. Love one another. Love one another in this totally self-sacrificial, for the good of the other, not necessarily yourself, laying your own life down kind of way. You love each other, and you love each other. You love people as. And meaning in the very same way, to the same degree, the same style of love that you've been experiencing with me, you just do that. You just run with that. You love as I have loved you. That's how That's how you remain in the flow of love. That's how you remain in the flow, which, as it turns out, is also a way of joy, which brings us back to where we started. And I've told you this. This whole conversation has all been about my joy now being in you and your joy being maxed out. I've told you this so that you would be profoundly joyful and enjoyable to be with. It turns out that true joy, real joy, is both an expression of love and a byproduct of it. It's an expression. Love is an expression of or joy is an expression of and a byproduct of love. Or as we said earlier, love makes people happy. Love makes people happy receiving it. Yes, that is nice, but especially even more giving it. Doing the loving, kind, generous, even self-sacrificial thing, even if, and in fact, especially if you get absolutely nothing out of it. Now, if that were true, I mean, it's a nice thing to say, but if that were really true, we might expect it to be verifiably true. Like if we could study that, could you study that? Could you create studies to find out if that's true or not? And if you could study it, then that might reveal if this were really true, it could be proven to be true, and drum roll, it has been. It actually has been. One of my favorite studies on this is an unusual study that followed 5 women volunteers around for a 3-year period. These 5 women all had MS, and I know people who have it. It's a very debilitating thing, and they were chosen as peer supporters for 67 other MS patients, these 5. And they were trained in active and compassionate listening techniques and instructed then to call each of the other 67 patients and talk to them for 15 minutes at least once a month. The results at the end of 3 years showed that the peer supporters, the givers of love and care, experienced increased satisfaction, usefulness, that's not surprising, and feelings of mastery, feelings of efficacy, if you will. They reported engaging in more social activities, like being more outgoing, connected with others, enduring less depression. Indeed, when interviewed, these 5 women described having undergone dramatic changes in their lives as a result of the way they helped other people. Their compassion levels, their compassion for others, seemed to take their focus off of themselves, and they became better listeners and more empathetic and less judgmental over time. But the most interesting result is how their levels of happiness and joy compared at the end of 3 years with the people who are receiving care. So they're giving it, and 67 others are receiving it, and when compared with the whole sample group of patients, the MS patients these ladies had been loving on for 3 years, the givers witnessed a, quote, boost in their global life satisfaction. A boost in their global life satisfaction that was 7 times greater than that shown by the receivers. That caring for others actively, loving others actively, made them both more joyful and more enjoyable to be around. Martin Seligman is one of my favorite researchers on this topic. He's out of the University of Pennsylvania, brilliant researcher, and he tells a story of something that happened in one of his classes at the University of Pennsylvania. One of the students, he said, in one of his classes, raised this question, just kind of wondered if, hey, does happiness come more from the exercise of kindness or more readily from having fun? Like, what will make you happier and maybe happier longer or more quickly, the exercise of kindness or just having fun? And after a heated dispute, he says, we each undertook an assignment for the next class to engage in one pleasurable activity, to have some fun, and one philanthropic activity, an act of kindness, and then to write about both of them. He says in his book, Authentic Happiness, he says the results were life-changing. The afterglow, that's the word he uses, the afterglow of the pleasurable activity, hanging out with friends, watching a movie, eating a hot fudge sundae, like nice stuff, paled in comparison with the effects of the giving action. He says, when our philanthropic acts were spontaneous and called upon personal strengths, the whole day went better. Everything went better. After one junior told about her nephew phoning her with needing help with his 3rd grade arithmetic. And she says, after an hour of tutoring him, she was astonished to discover that for the rest of the day, I love this one, I could listen better, I was mellower, and people liked me much more than usual, which makes me wonder a little bit about her and how she could tell that. Again, she was both more joyful and apparently more enjoyable because of love. On the flip side, all of the things that we normally think would create a bump in our joy quotient, if you will, our JQ, like, man, if I could just get a better job or get that pay raise or like a killer vacation. I mean, hello, Richard with his $250K a year and his Porsche, like that would be awesome. A house with a pool, a great vacation. I'll take the Tahiti vacation, yes. Even, check this out, even winning the lottery, that all the things that we think would give us a bump in how joyful or happy we are result in, at best, only a temporary bump in our overall happiness. This is called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill, Google it, but here is a short video that explains the hedonic treadmill.
Something called the hedonic treadmill. The hedonic treadmill explains the fact that whatever positive or negative impacts occur, people's happiness levels will always equalize. Like, think about all of the positive impacts technology has had on everyday life. Many diseases have been eradicated. Tons of simple tasks are 1,000 times easier. You have a whole universe of information right at your fingertips. But are we on the whole any happier than we were in 1950? I mean, for all of the awesome and positive stuff that happened, why aren't we all just constantly enthralled? Though life might be easier, we are not necessarily happier.
I made myself sad.
That is the hedonic treadmill hard at work. It explains how Fry can be frozen for 1,000 years and basically be fine within a day or two. And how, as Louis C.K. might put it, everything is amazing and nobody is happy.
You're sitting in a chair in the sky.
Yes.
The hedonic treadmill, it basically means your brain has a way of constantly resetting baseline. After something great, after something not so great, within a short period of time, your brain just resets baseline to absorb that new experience, and now you're about as happy as you were winning the lottery. Studies specifically have related to winning the lottery within a short period of time. You will be about as happy as you are right now. Here's the point of all of this research. You cannot acquire or consume or climb your way to happiness. No purchase, no achievement, no fun activity, nothing that you consume, no position, no status, no recognition that you can achieve can ever or will ever result in sustainable joy or happiness. In fact, if anything, just like an appetite, it just makes you crave more. You cannot acquire or consume or climb your way to happiness. But here's the good news. You can love your way there. You can love and give and care and serve your way there. Joy really is an expression of and a byproduct of love. Which brings us back to Richard and Lorna. Which one is more likely to be happy? There's all kinds of research on this. Gender has no impact on happiness. Climate has no noticeable impact, which is weird. Like, people in cold climates are as happy as people in warm climates. I don't know. Even chronic health problems, like kidney problems and dialysis, seem to have no long-term impact on a person's happiness. People with a lot of money are definitely not any happier than people with very little money. Beautiful people aren't happier than those who are considered plain, and younger people are actually a little less happy than older people. It turns out that happiness is tied to the things that have surprised researchers again and again, like volunteering, giving blood and serving others in need and being generous and worshiping in community and building a deeper faith and being encumbered, just all up and encumbered with many vital connections in a community, being loved and loving, knowing and being known, serving and being served, needing and being needed. In other words, the reciprocal connection of a community of people who are loving like Jesus loved and being like Jesus was. I've told you this. I told you this so that my joy would be in you. My joy would be in you and your joy would be complete. It's why we often say, and we say this from time to time around here, following Jesus will make your life better. Not easier, but easier isn't better. Following Jesus will make your life better, and it will make you better at life, and it will make you better at life for other people. So, what the world needs now. What the world needs now is for Christians to be Christ-like, for followers of Jesus to be Jesus-like, for following Jesus, following communities of people to be Jesus-like. What the world needs now is people of joy whose lives exude joy. People of joy whose lives with others actually exude joy. People who bring the joy. People who are joyful on the inside and enjoyable to be around, who bring joy to the room, who bring joy to the family reunion, who bring joy to the workplace and the office, and then bring the joy on back home, who bring joy to their neighborhood, joy to the HOA meeting, joy to the board meeting. They are like the joy carriers everywhere they go because of how incredibly well and profoundly and deeply and consistently and selflessly they love. They just love and give and care really, really well. And imagine what the world would look like. Imagine what this community would look like. Imagine what your home life would look like if every person who called themselves Christian was a person of joy. A person of joy whose life with others exuded joy. A person who made the world and the room a little more bright, a little more joyful because of how well they just love people. So here's the question that we end with. What will you do to grow your joy quotient this week? Now, this is a great question to ask, whether you call yourself a follower of Jesus or not. If you're processing that, don't know where you are, think what you used to be. But especially if you call yourself a Christian, what will you do to grow your joy quotient this week? Like, how is this going to land for you? How is this going to land for me? Do you want this? I bet you do. Well, Jesus suggests, in fact, for his followers, he insists, in fact, he commands, if you will, that we grow our joy and we grow our joy quotient by staying connected to the flow of his love from his Father to him and through him to us and through us to others, that we stay connected in that flow of love and that we do so precisely the way he did it. And so, if you're down, here is your joy assignment for the week. Are you ready to feel better? Here we go. A la Martin Seligman, do something fun, absolutely. Do something fun that you'll enjoy for sure. But this week, do something. Do something that is an act of sheer, selfless, for the good of someone else. I get nothing at all out of this. Generosity and kindness. Some act of just over the top, didn't even see it coming, for the good of someone else, not me, generosity and kindness. And this week, watch for that moment, just like Jesus did. Just like he said he goes through his life, watch for it. Watch for that moment. Remind yourself that it's coming. Listen for that moment. Ask God to show you that moment. Talk to him about it, maybe even right now where you're sitting. Like, God, I'm in that. Like, show me something this week. Will you lead me to a moment and give me eyes to see it? And when you see it, and you will, when you see it, however sacrificial or weird or out of your comfort zone, whatever that is that you see, like, oh, that person and I could, do it. When you see it, do it. The bigger and more selfless, the better. And then bring all that joy back with you next week and join us for part 3 of our series, What Our World Needs Now. Let me close this in prayer. I'm always thinking, I don't know how this lands with you. I know how it's landed with me. So I just want to pray this. Heavenly Father, and maybe you just repeat this prayer after me in your own heart and mind. Heavenly Father, give me ears to hear what I needed to hear. Not what I didn't need to hear. Give me ears to hear what I needed to hear. Please. Give me the grace I need to actually receive that and accept it and pull it inside myself with no shame and no blame, just to see it, accept it, hear it. And then, Father, would you give me the courage and the willingness to take the next step? I'm saying yes to you now. Would you lead me to something? Maybe a number of some things, ways that I can be your hands and feet, ways that I can be an extension of your flow of love, like a branch to a vine, what you might want to do through me. I just want to say yes to that. Would you lead me? Would you lead me to that? And I will do it. Father, we thank you that you love us so much that you want us to live what really is our best possible life, our created in the image of God, full of nobility and dignity and glory and joy life, and that you are trying so hard, often against our will, to take us there. And so tonight, we are just so grateful and so willing to stay connected to that flow this week. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.